Hi guys, just a little sort of public announcement before the show. This week, some things occurred during the recording to put my mind in other areas. I do apologise about that. So I have made a couple of boobs. So those hardcore Iron Maiden fans out there, like myself and included, I attached Speed of Light to the wrong album and completely forgot about El Dorado, and also completely forgot about Yannick Gers. It wasn't deliberate. My brain went elsewhere. So those big fans out there, I do apologise. Apologise to Yannick as well. I do make up for it in the second half. But those that don't get to the second half will not be able to shake a fist at me and tell me, burn him, burn him. I got it right in the end. As you know, I don't edit this show, so it wasn't until I listened back I realised I'd made a boob. Enjoy the show, forgive my errors, and I really hope you enjoy it. Bye for now. Welcome, guys, to this week's episode of Heavy Metal Tones with me, your podcast host, Tony Evans. Yes, Heavy Metal Tones, here on a lovely, sunny Monday afternoon here in the nation's capital of Australia, Canberra. Now, as you would have seen if you've watched my TikTok videos, and I'm sure some of you do, that I have decided this week to revisit the first album I ever talked about, one of the first albums I ever talked about, way back in the midst of time when I had a crappy microphone. I didn't have a DAW, it doesn't mean a DAW on my room, I mean a DAW, a digital audio workstation. And I just was, sort of lockdownish time, and I set on this adventure to, just chat to the world and, do what I do. And this album came out. Now, it's by, obviously, as you can tell, if you looked at the thumbnail and you've clicked on the show, you know by now, it's Iron Maiden's 17th studio album, Senjutsu, which sort of vaguely translates to strategy and tactics, or tactics and strategy. Which is to say that this album is. Now, the last time I did eulogize about it, I'm gonna talk differently about it this time. More in depth, I think. We're not going to go through all of the lyrical content of the songs, but I will look at the ideas behind it, the musical ups and downs of the album. Now, it came out in 2021. Okay, in around about the August the 19th time over here, right smack in the middle of 4 days. I think it was 4 days into our lockdown here in Canberra, the proper lockdown. It is 1 hour and 21 minutes long. It's a double album. It's got one of the best Eddie covers since the millennium, in my opinion. The Eddie Japanese warrior, the shogun, whatever that you would like to call them, terrifying mixture of ancient culture and modern horror, with Mark Wilkinson on duties there. Absolutely beautiful compared to the Speed of Light Eddie. We won't mention that. The Final Frontier Eddie. We probably shouldn't even mention the album, to be honest with you, but we won't mention that one, because I thought that was the end of Eddie. I thought he'd gone, and then of course mercifully we got the Mayan Eddie, which was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. This one is just a little bit better, I think. Anyway, outside of the artwork, what's inside the medium, on the tape or the cassette or the CD or the streaming? Well, we have quite a tasty little lineup of songs. We have Senjutsu, Stratego, Writing on the Wall, which was the lead-out single, followed by Stratego, Lost in the Lost World, Days of Future Past, The Time Machine, Darkest Hour, Death of the Celts, The Parchment, and Hell on Earth. And 4 of these tracks were written solely by Steve Harris, and no surprise there that they're my favourite on the album. That's Lost in a Lost World, Death of the Celts, The Parchment, and Hell on Earth. It is a very strong album. It's produced by Kevin Shirley. As I said, the album covers by Mark Wilkinson and Michael Kamandi. It says there. I can't read my handwriting, so I apologise for that. It got to number 3 in the Australian metal charts, number 1 in the normal charts. It charted at number 2 in the UK, and in the US it got to number 1 in the Billboard Top 100 and number 2 in the alternative charts. It's first album for quite some years. It had its flaws when it was released. Firstly, released during a time when the world was in a bit of an uncertainty. The one good thing about this album, and I'm going to really, really stick this to people that did it at the time, because it really annoyed me at the time, is that it's nothing COVID related on this album. Nothing. They haven't pandered to, let's write a COVID song, it's the end of the world. No, they haven't done that. Steve Harris and the boys have stuck with what they do very, very well. They do literature, classic literature related songs. They do intelligent concept songs. They do sort of grown up, almost university sort of songs. You know what I mean? They don't. It's not about chasing women around cars and and sniffing coke and doing dope and all that kind of crap. They really are an intelligent band. I mean, Steve Harris alone, along with Bruce Dickinson, are 2 very, very smart cookies. And of course, and then you have Adrian Smith, who's extremely well educated, a young boy, and Dave Murray, and of course Nico McBrain. Yes, he's found God, but that's fine. That's no problem. That doesn't cause an issue. His music still is the same as ever. Not that that makes any difference. Don't know even why I brought it up. He's not been well recently. They had a stroke back in January, so I really wish him all the best recovery. I mean, he's recovering apparently very, very well, but he's a fit young man. When I say young man, a fit older man. He plays his golf. He lives in America. Doesn't drink. Doesn't smoke. He's doing pretty well for himself, looking after himself. But these things happen, right? Now, the production on this album, I think, is the best production definitely since... it's a big call, but I think definitely since Dance of Death. I'd definitely say so. Or even before, actually, probably Brave New World. It doesn't have... It's got the more mature Maiden sound, which some people, I have been told, they find it boring. Those people can leave my presence now, forthwith, and leave if you think that. If you don't and you want to keep listening, be my guess. But boring, it is not. So it's not a million miles an hour in the speed, but Maiden never were. Maiden were about complicated, interesting time changes and dual guitars and brilliant full depth drumming and of course the air raid siren and vocals of Bruce Dickinson and the punk aesthetic of Paul Di'Anno. So it was never about speed. If you want speed, then you can go over to your Slayers and your Metallicas and your all that, which are wonderful. But when you turn to Maiden, you don't go there for speed. You go to Maiden for pure rhythmic beauty, and that's what you get from this album. This is possibly... It does sound a great deal like music left... I originally thought, when I reviewed this way back in the midst of time, that I thought it sounded like it was leftovers from the previous album, but I actually think that this is more like, sounds-wise, particularly lead single, Writing on the Wall. I think it has. I originally had a Mayan feel to it. I'm actually reconsidering it after a year or so of listening. I think it sounds much more like, musically, like they've taken off stuff from Final Frontier. Now, you probably gathered it's not an album that I enjoy. It's not an album that I go back to regularly. It has got some doozies on it. I really love When the Wind Blows. But that's because I like Steve Harris's epic literary jaunts. Okay, but yeah, it sounds musically like that. I originally thought that it came off the previous. I really did, but no, it's certainly more sonically like, I don't know whether the guitar sound with the Murray and so on have refound the sound from that album, or they've got bits they want to reuse. I mean, musicians have lots of things they reuse and they find, I didn't use them for that album, I'll use it for this album, and so on. And that brings me to a lot of chagrin that people gave this album. I mentioned it before. Matt, my good friend Matt, who's probably the biggest Maiden fan I've ever met, and I thought I was pretty bloody big, but this guy is just what he doesn't have, and what he doesn't own, and what he doesn't know about Maiden, you could put on a stamp. It's ridiculous. He's the go-to man if you want anything Maiden. Really, he is the man to talk to. And he reached out to me when the single came out and was quite distraught. He genuinely was. He was. Whoops, there's me knocking my mic. He really didn't like Writing on the Wall, in the same way that I didn't like Speed of Light. And what the problem was at the time, as I explained to him, that one single does not make an album. And to be fair, on this album, there is a couple of singles available. Yes, Stratego, which came out secondly, which is a brilliant single. But unfortunately, Maiden have never been... You might say, no, Tony, no. They brought out, Number of the Beast and Run to the Hills and Wicker Man. No, they're not really singles band. They are not. They are a album band. And yes, single success is delicious, and single success is good and used to be the be-all and end-all. But really, when you're musicians as good as these guys, it isn't about singles. How can you contain 9 minutes and 10 seconds in a single? How can you edit down? I mean, it's like trying to say, let's make a single version of Rime of the Ancient Mariner or Empire of the Clouds. It's madness. It's just absolute madness. It can't be done. And so it came out, the single. And yes, it doesn't sound like traditional Maiden, does it? It doesn't have the gallop. It's a little bit thin. It's got kind of a... It definitely sounds like from Final Frontier. It sort of feels tacked on. It's written by Bruce Dickinson and Adrian Smith, I believe. Look, it's not a bad song. Would I skip it on the album? No, because I never skip anything when it comes to Maiden. Would I have released it as a single first off? No, I probably wouldn't have done, because it got a lot of stick. I would have gone straight out with Stratego, probably even Senjutsu, to be fair. But we're not the music execs. We're not in the band. It's not our choice. It's their choice, and not every choice that these musicians make is correct. It was correct for them. It just wasn't correct for a lot of people, and I think it put a lot of people on their tenterhooks, worrying what is the album going to be like if this is the single. But man, they didn't need to worry. And as Matt said afterwards, I really should listen to your tone, and I was right. I was absolutely right. I went onto YouTube, made a video, and I said, look, come on, calm down, guys. This is, we've all been there a long time, and we've listened to bands where singles don't work. They just don't work, and they don't demonstrate the album, and they almost sometimes ruin the feel of an album. It's what I tend to not listen to lead out singles and bands on albums now. There's a new Stephen Wilson album coming out on the 29th of September, the Harmony Codex. I've only listened to one single, purely because it came across in my feed and I'd forgot to press stop, and I just listened to it, and sort of wish I hadn't, because I want to go into the album on that day, that night, absolutely fresh-eared. I don't want to be the point where, and we've all done it, the single is played so much that when you get the album, you almost skip that song because you've learned it, you've heard it so much. And for me, it's a spoiler. You know, I love the old days where singles that came out from bands weren't on the album. Maiden have done it, right? Marillion do it. I've done it. A lot of bands have done it, where the single that they released was not on the album. And I think that makes a lot more sense, because when you buy the album, then you have a whole new sensation, right? You might bung the album song on a special, second last, hidden track on a CD, or if it's on vinyl, tuck it right at the end, but I don't know. Anyway, where do I go from here? Now, it was their first album for 6 years since the previous one, and that was a brilliant tour, had some great songs on it. As I said, Empire of the Clouds is up there with for me, with Alexander the Great, Rime of the Ancient Mariner, and When the Wind Blows, for epic Maiden album closures, right? What a way to end an album, with the longest song they've ever produced. And this album has another one of those absolute fucking doozies on it, which I won't get to yet. We'll get to that in a minute. We'll probably get to those when we get to the other side. But is it a concept album? I think to myself, there's a lot of war mentioned on this album. There's a lot of there's a lot of conflict, I should say, on this album. I don't think that means it's a concept album. I think it's just the way that the minds of Steve and Dave and Adrian and Bruce and Nico work. They enjoy. I know, for instance, Bruce is a big Second World War buff, being a pilot. Steve loves his ancient history and his poetry. I know that Adrian and Dave are big history buffs as well. Nico is just loves anything. Right? Nico is just Nico, and loves a bit of a laugh. And he's if you're going to have the Jestery song on this album, it'll be from him, I'm sure. Although he hasn't written many, I think, in the history of the bands. I think it's only 2, isn't it? But anyway, I could be wrong, Maiden fans. Don't get me wrong. Don't jump down my throat on it. Yes, so there is some really complicated themes that are coming up we're going to talk about. But musically, I think it's the most mature. There is some wonderful changes of rhythm, some turns of speed, some only issues I will have with this album, and I had it with the previous album, and I've had it with Bruce for quite some time now, is that he love him, I love Bruce, and I'm so looking forward to the new solo album that's going to come out next year. He's much more pleasant, he's better to hear when he's in a lower register and a lower key. When he tries to hit those really hard and high fast stuff, he loses it. He almost becomes inaudible, and the lyric is lost. And sadly, I think that's him just trying to be the air raid that he always has been. And good on him for trying. It's just there's bits there where he goes up that key, and you go, oh, come on, Bruce, bring it back. And I think that was one of the problems with Writing on the Wall. There's a bit there in the middle where he sort of almost becomes unmusical, and that's not what I mean. I don't mean it in a bad way. He just sort of becomes you can't hear him. He's just wailing, which is fine, but not really Brucey, is he? Bruce enunciation, apart from when he plays live, we all know when he's live and he speeds up. Like, we all heard live versions of Hello Be Thy Name where we can barely hear the lyric. He can't understand what he's saying. That's just the band speeding up. That's just him speeding up, right? Anyway, that's one of the issues with the latter albums, why this one is a better album, because I think someone's whispered in his ear and said, look, Brucey, we're going to play this in this key. What do you reckon? And he was probably going to go, yeah. And that may be a consequence of the cancer that he was suffering, and the throat issues that he suffered leading up to the album. Could be that. It could be just a whisper in the ear by old Kevin Shirley, who knows what he's doing. The mutt, they call him. Or it might be even just a realisation that Bruce has come to. Anywho, that's enough jibber jabber about what I think about the album, where it sits in the pantheon. We'll go and get a fresh drink. We'll pause it. We'll listen to some adverts. They might sell you some furniture. Who knows? And who knows? In my age group that listens to the show, could be anything. Synatogen, even. Anyway, I will pause it now. We'll chat very soon. Talk to you on the other side, guys. Bye for now. Welcome back, guys, to part 2 of the show. Now, I'd also like to put a caveat out there for those that are still listening, that any Maiden is good Maiden, even bad Maiden, and there is some. We all have to admit that is good Maiden. So, while we have the joyous life of a band in our lives, like Maiden, let's just enjoy every minute that they give us, because who knows when they might just chuck it in, and that day will come, and that day will be a very sad, very, very sad day for a lot of us. I'm not going to even try and bring it up because it might happen. Don't put it in the ether and leave it on the back burner. Anyway, now I'm not going to go through every single track on this album because I could be here all day. I'm just going to pull out some individual tracks, the ones that I think that are real standouts, and I'm going to start with Death of the Celts. You're saying, Tony, but that's halfway down the album. That's on the second album. Yes, it is. But it is truly, I'm picking this one out because this truly is a very special song. It's special for what it talks about. It's special in its musicality. It's special in the pantheon of Maiden songs in general. Firstly, it is one of the... I told this on the first time I mentioned this podcast. I put this album on, as I always do. I want peace and quiet on my own. I shut my bedroom door. I turn the lights off. In the dark, I put the headphones on, and I play it. And when it got to Death of the Celts, I won't deny this, dear listeners. I cried. I openly wept. I had to get a tissue. I couldn't control myself. I'm feeling teary now. When I first heard Rime of the Ancient Mariner, which I still, as you know, I considered the greatest heavy metal song ever written. When I first heard that song, it took me somewhere I can't possibly even describe. I was walking down, if anyone from Hendon, where I was born and bred, I was walking up Church Lane, near the church there. I told the story before. I'd bought the album on cassette, and by the time I got from Brent Cross, Al Price and Brent Cross, to Church Lane, that's when Rime of the Ancient Mariner came on, and I had to stop. And I stopped in my tracks, and I sat on a bench opposite the church, and I felt I was so naughty because it was the most darkest music I've ever heard, loudest and heaviest music. But the music, that piece of music, genuinely, and I mean genuinely, changed my life. And I felt that same weird way about Death of the Celts. I love music, as you know, as we all listen to this podcast too, otherwise we wouldn't be listening to it. I love music in a way that some people don't. I will enjoy the nuance of one or two note changes. I find beauty in the darkest places, in the strangest of note combinations, the way that a little thing comes in here or disappears there, or something emerges from the back. All these sort of little things I find stimulating. And with Death of the Celts, Steve Harris's bass part is truly, truly, truly one of the greatest bass lines of them all. I don't know where that came from, Steve, mate, but more of the same, please, more of the same. It is just truly, it's like Another One Bites the Dust. It's like the Who's, the bass solo in My Generation, right? It's like Geddy Lee, anything that Geddy Lee would do. It's just, it stopped me. It stopped me and I cried. But that wasn't the only part, the reason that song moved me. It moved me because of what it's about. Now, you might say, oh, it's just about, what is it there for the Celts? The Celts are ancient peoples, and, Christianity has changed that. But no, what Steve Harris is talking about is the not invasion of the Romans in 45 AD, 43 AD, sorry. Claudius invaded England and changed the landscape, the religious landscape, and the reticle, the heterical, what the wrong word I'm trying to think, the educational landscape, that's what I'm trying to say, of Britain. And for 45 years they ventured up to get to Scotland, and they weren't, see, the word invasion is really a hard one here, because the Romans didn't invade England, they arrived. The English actually, or the native Britons at that time, apart from a few tribes like the Iceni, they were quite openly sort of welcomed, because they brought trade, they brought education, they brought, everyone knows that lovely line, in Life of Brian, what did the Romans ever do for us, right? Well, that's basically what they did, in a nutshell, okay? But they brought at a time when Christianity was still starting to flood through into the Roman Empire, and what they did is they would assimilate local gods or deities of the Celts and of the Britannic tribes, and they would use them and sort of blend them with their Roman gods, right? But then they started to sort of move towards from a polytheistic, I can't say the word, to a monotheistic, I can't say the word, I mean, many gods to one god, you know what I'm trying to say. And so that, when that happened, they started to sort of, it was when they were moving more towards the borders of Scotland and Wales, and they were they were being attacked by the Picts, which are from Scotland, and the Welsh Celts, the Druids, and so on. So they were fighting these borders to, more so, not on several different levels, to go forward into the lands and to conquer the lands because of the tin and the ore and the metals and the natural resources that the country had, but also to sort of spread the word of Christ, is what they were doing later towards the campaign in Britain. They were there. I mean, one of the biggest sort of massacres was on the Isle of Anglesey, in Wales, where they crossed the Menai Straits, which is an 8-kilometre waterway, which takes a lot of getting over. And they slaughtered all of the local Druidic natives, and they cut all the oak trees down, which were sacred to them, and they burnt them to the ground, and they garrisoned that island for 300 years to protect it from the Irish and also help trade routes through to Scotland, further up into Wales. Now that's what the Death of the Celts is about, you hear in the lyric, and I'm not going to go for the lyric, but that's basically what I have maybe simplified it, but that's what Steve is talking about. This is a Steve Harris song again, and polytheistic and monotheistic. That's what I'm trying to say. Okay, so the battle was at between 60 and 61 AD is when the battle at Anglesey was, the first fight, and then there was another one in 71 AD. Well and truly when the Christian faith was burgeoning across the Roman Empire, and sort of moving towards all its outer lining provinces. But that heaviness aside, that's what the song is about, and I think that's what really gets me, because most of us are from Celtic backgrounds, right? My father being from a Welsh family, grandmother from Scotland. I mean, it couldn't get more Celtic than really, and so it really sort of sat with me. He has a way, Steve, of through his music and his lyric. I mean, he's a poet laureate. He really is a wonderful poet. He really, comes up with the goods when it comes to the depths of the lyric, and musically it is fantastic. As I said, the bass line, the guitar parts, the drumming, Bruce's vocals are beautiful. I just can't help but play that song, and I sat there thinking, how do I play this bass line? I've got to learn this bass line. It really is something of, and I love the way, about 6 minutes into the song, it just turns on its head, and it's a different pace, and it's a different texture, and it's got the gallop, it's got different time signatures, so progressive. And we know that Maiden's latter albums are more progressive because that's the band's favourite form of music outside of metal, right? Bruce is a big and Steve are big Jethro Tull fans, Yes fans, Genesis fans. That they don't shy away from it, and they make brilliant heavy metal within those boundaries. But anyway, we come out of that song aside, right? Then I'm going to look at another really heavy. My God, when I looked into this song more closely, it really, again, another Steve Harris song, and that's The Parchment. Okay, I think many people think, and he hasn't said it out loud, but many of us think it's about the Parthian Empire, which lasted for 400 years, from about 247 BC to 224 AD in what is now Iran, and due to the rise of Christianity, the Zoroastrian, which is one of the earliest monotheistic religions, sort of takes a bit of Judaism and sort of Christianity in itself. I know a few Zoroastrians, actually. It's a really interesting religion. But they were slaughtered by the Emperor Nero under his orders to destroy all faith that wasn't an adjunct or approved by the Roman state. And so that's what The Parchment is about, okay? Wow, heavy shit, right? We've gone from the death of the Celts to the annihilation of an ancient, very, very ancient, one of the oldest ancient religions, organized religions on the planet, this is Zoroastrianism, in Iran, by the Romans again. So what have the Romans ever done for us? They give us roads, but they took away the religions. Anyway, musically, I've heard people say they don't like this song. I think it's one of the most complicated pieces of music on the album, outside of Death of the Celts. I think it has some fantastic textures It's got wonderful time changes. Bruce's vocal in it is lower tone, so it works really well. The two guitar attack. I mean, of course, I keep forgetting. I haven't mentioned. See, he's been with the band for 30 years, and I didn't mention him, did I? I didn't mention, right? I didn't mention he of the silly guitar spinning, right? He also writes songs, okay? And he also is a very intelligent man. Mr. Yannick Gers. Look, I've completely forgot to mention him at the beginning. I'm such an old school man. He's been with the band since like 1990, for God's sake. Anyway, all three guitars on this particular track really sing. There's that fantastic Wishbone Ash dual guitar sound that Steve always wanted. Now with Yannick, chiming in, he's got that particular stratty sound that he likes to have. You can sort of hear him, and it's heavy subject, right? It's a heavy subject matter, right? And it wouldn't be a Maiden album if it didn't have the occasional heavy subject on it, right? And then, look, let's have a chat about The Darkest Hour, all right? Now, this is not a purely Steve song. This is written by a couple of the band. I think it's Bruce and Steve. Could be Bruce and Adrian. I didn't write it down. Don't get me wrong. It's basically about Churchill and the Battle of Britain. And now the band are fascinated, as you will know, about the Second World War, aerial battles particularly. Bruce being a pilot, and the sort of I think this is very pertinent, this song. I'm really gonna say this, and I might get myself in a little bit of trouble, but I think it's very pertinent because whether he was liked or not, Churchill was not a liked peacetime prime minister. He wasn't a good peacetime prime minister, but he didn't need to be. He rallied. Yes, he made some very poor decisions. Read the Dardanelles in the First World War. We all know these issues. He's human, right? But in the Second World War, what the British nation needed, and to be honest, what the English-speaking world needed, was a character who stood up and said, "No, we're not having this. You're not marching around this world and thinking that you can own it." Now, I know it's a bit of a contrary position from a country that had a British Empire that owned two-thirds of the world. I know that. What I'm trying to say is that you can't control it with an evil iron hand. Okay? And for all of his frailties, his black dog, his alcoholism, he was and will always be one of the most important Britons in the history of humanity, for what he said, and he's just being him, rallying the British nation rallied. I mean, it was a very difficult war. We didn't win that on our own. We say the English win the war. We know that was the Polish and the hard-fought French underground, the Czechs, the Australians, the Indians, everyone, the Americans. But we fought it hard, and we fought it well, as Bruce would say. And sometime recently, in the last few years, this whole woke movement is trying to cancel people and write him out of history because they don't like what he says, and he was only human, and he was of a Victorian era, and he had a different mindset, and he would have said some stuff that would offend people now, but that doesn't mean he's not a great person and a great man in history. And this is what this song, I think, is special for, because it's celebrating the stand of a small island in the middle of the ocean, in the middle of the sea, against a vast German autonomy, a machine-led war. And we have to thank the Polish, because without the Polish, we wouldn't have had the pilots to win that battle in the air. And you know, it's just, I don't know, it's a really, for me, it's a really important song musically, because it's just, I think it's Bruce's best vocal on the album. I think I might keep saying that, but I just think it is probably his best vocal on the album. You really feel the passion and hear it in the voice. I love the sound of the water lapping, which is obviously the channel, British English channel, lapping at the beginning, the sound effect, and then, you know, just it sits up there with 2 Minutes to Midnight for me. It really does, as a sort of reach out to say we're proud of it. You know, we did what we did, and the guys. I mean, Bruce and Steve and all the boys. They're you know, their age now. They're not that far away from knowing people that fought and died in that war. You know, and it is a great piece of music. I think it sits perfectly in the mix. I think Nico's drumming on it is exceptional, and it, you know, it sits around about 8 minutes long, which is perfect, absolutely perfect for this album. You know, so there's some big hitters in here, but then, you know, also you're saying, but Tony, where's the literary aspect of this album? Where's the, you know, a song based on a book? Well, okay, hold your horses. We've got one cracker in the Time Machine, H.G. Wells' 1895 classic book that actually invented the concept of time travel for the masses. I'm sure it was thought about by philosophers and scientists, but this was a man writing this story. It is a brilliant book. I don't know if you've ever read it. I have read it. The 1960s movie is fantastic. They've made a couple of them, one a couple of years ago, which is absolutely a shocker, but the 1960s one is brilliant. You know, the way that he travels, you know, through time, and, you know, tries not to affect causality, and it's such a Victorian concept, isn't it? It's very we've conquered the world, now let's conquer the sciences. You know, Jules Verne was another great writer, French writer, that also wrote these amazing things like 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and you know, brilliant books. I mean, The First Men of the Moon is a great book I'd highly recommend. Obviously, one day Maiden might even do a cover of that book. But it's a great piece of music. Again, lyrically, it tells a story beautifully. Steve has this knack of making you be able to sort of get the book, or the short story, or the poem, or the idea, like Death of the Celts, like The Parchment, in a snapshot of only 8 minutes. I don't know how he does it. I mean, he is a genius. We all know that. There was no doubt about that. But yeah, that's a brilliant one. You think, well, okay, well, that's the book. Now, that's another man that people were trying to erase from history, and I find it just hurts. It hurts me, and I'm sure it hurts a lot of people that this stuff is going on. It's a whole different podcast, a whole different corner. I won't about fighting, because I'm not going to win. And then we have Lost in a Lost World, Steve Harris's other song on the album. Now this is a absolute cracker, because it's right back to Steve Harris's love, or apathy maybe, for native First People Americans, like Run to the Hills. This is about the genocide of the American First Nation peoples by the American and the British settlers, the British settlers that became Americans, I should say. Let me just find my notes that I wrote about it. Okay. What I wrote, it says it's got a beautiful guitar that coalesces really lovely with the harmonies in the vocals at the beginning. It changes in a heartbeat. It jumps straight into a Maiden gallop, then into a bruisey, full pomp heavy metal. It's got brilliant guitar riffs all the way through it. Steve's bass is just it jumps from one mood to another, and it just stops you in your tracks. I just wrote, how can anyone keep up with this man? And I wrote, the guitar solo in 6 minutes 32 into the song is the best on the album. I think I probably am going to say that's the case. It also has a very Final Frontier-y sound in the guitar solo, so I don't know whether they took that from there and used it for stuff that wasn't used in previous on the album itself. But yeah, it's not as catchy as Run to the Hills, and you have to actually look at the lyric or sit down and think about it. It's not as obvious, but it is a pretty fantastic look at the annihilation of first-person nations, which is happening everywhere. Happening in Australia, of course. It's happening in America, South America. Okay. Anyway, I want to try and bring it down to a bit of light. It's a bit heavy, and I've gone on quite. But then again, what can I do? What can I say? It's these are subject matters that he brings up. There is another pop culture reference in this this album, which I thought was one different thing, and when I researched it, found it was something else, and that's Days of Future Past. Brilliant. And I would have gone with this as a single because I like the sing-along chorus to it. And I thought Days of Future Past was based on a comic strip, but I was absolutely wrong. It's not. It is not. It's actually based on the Keanu Reeves movie Constantine. Now, Constantine is also a comic strip, so bits and pieces, I suppose. But it's based on the movie Constantine. It's about someone that walks between the lines of heaven and hell and the reality. Not a great movie, not one of my favourites. I mean, Keanu Reeves is good in it. They could have done a lot more with the movie. I think it's a little bit weak. But you might love it. You might go, Tony, that's my favourite movie of all time. So what are you talking about? And if it is, all power to you, brother and sister and whatever. I just find it a little bit weak. I'm not a massive Keanu Reeves fan anyway, to be brutally honest. I think he absolutely destroyed Dracula, although, to be honest, that movie destroyed itself. But I really hate that movie. God, I love Gary Oldman. Gary Oldman is one of my favourite actors of all time. Him playing Sid in Sid and Nancy. The evil guy in the evil cop in The Professional. Or the assassin, they called it in other country. I think over here in Australia. Brilliant actor, absolutely brilliant actor. Just think he had a really shocking movie in Dracula. Anyway, I'm sidestepping. Sorry, guys. That's really, and I haven't even spoke about Hell on Earth, or Stratego, or even Senjutsu, because I want you to jump into those songs and tell me what you think about them. I mean, I'm going to tell you that I think Stratego should have been the first single off the album. I think the Writing on the Wall doesn't need to be on the album. I think it feels a bit of a miss. As the album goes, where do I sit it in the pantheon of the 17 amazing albums that Maiden have produced? It's definitely the best since, for me, it's the best since 2000, since the turn of the millennium. I think they've managed to reclaim the thickness, chunkiness, soulful bluesiness of the band. I think they lost it for a little while there. I know that Steve was going through some marital issues. He wasn't writing a lot of songs, and it felt a little, to me, A Matter of Life and Death, Dance of Death, even though it's got Blood Brothers on it, and Passchendaele. And you know, I won't mention like Final Frontier. I think they're a bit thin, to be brutally honest. But you know, the last two have been back to form, I think. And just hope that the next one, whether it be the last or who knows, will be. If it can match this one, will be quite interesting, because this is an epic, an absolute epic. Double album. You have to spend time with it. It's not going to go past very quickly. As I said, it's 1 hour and 21 minutes. The longest album, I think, to boot. I think. I will have a look into that. Let me just 1 second and pause, and I'll tell you if I'm right. Nope, it was the second longest. The longest is the previous one, which is obviously it was 1 hour and 32 minutes. The previous album, Book of Souls. I have realised that I've been making a boob. Speed of Light is actually off Book of Souls. I didn't mean it. I mean El Dorado. That's the song I bloody meant. I really don't like it. I don't know why I thought Speed of Light. I actually didn't like Speed of Light either, to be fair. So that's probably why it's stuck in my brain. So all you Iron Maiden fans, I'm sorry if you turned off because you didn't realise I've made a boob. I just had an old man moment, right? I just had an old man moment. You can forgive me, can't you? Please forgive me. I'm sure you do. Anyway, El Dorado was awful. Speed of Light I didn't like. And, of course, as we can talk about now, Writing on the Wall, another one. Anyway, this is their second longest album. It is a cracker of an album. I highly recommend you go and sit down and listen to it. I've babbled on long enough about it, I'm sure. I thought I just have to revisit it and chat about this. It's what it's on about, what it means to me. Did it make you do it? Did it give you any emotion? Did you, like me, openly weep during Death of the Celts? Maybe not, I don't know. But it just was delicious. It's just wonderful, and I have to say sneakingly that I go to that track first and then I play the rest. Won't deny that's my usually, because I just can't. I want to get it over. I want to just listen to it. Sometimes I'll just play the album in its entirety, but most of the time I'll jump there first and then sort of mix around and go from there. Anyway, enough said of me. I've babbled on long enough. Have a really good rest of your day. I hope you've enjoyed the show. I love doing it. Thank you for those that are reaching out and giving me reviews. I've had some interesting ones from listeners on iTunes. Thank you for the negativity and the positivity. Okay, we only learn from our mistakes, don't we? Or from what people think. I mean, I'm not going to change the way I do the show. It's just nice to know that people have listened and have an opinion. Anyway, bye for now, guys. Keep safe, keep rocking and rolling, and come on, you irons.